All right, class, today we're going to find the moral. In today's lesson, you guys are going to identify the moral of a story by collaborating in your small groups and then creating a story of your own. All right, so first let's talk. What's the moral of a story? The moral of a story is the lesson that the story teaches. So what are you learning from this story? That's the moral. So short film number one, we're going to watch a short film. And before we watch it, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the moral is because I want you to be able to watch and understand where that's coming from. So the moral of this short film is that it's better to work together to solve a problem than working against each other. Teamwork always wins in the end. So in this story, you'll see the bear and the moose were not willing to work together to find a solution. They couldn't compromise. They fought, they pushed, they shoved, they do all these things. And in the end, they both end up failing because they can't work together. But you'll also see a rabbit and a raccoon. And the rabbit and the raccoon end up in the same predicament as the bear and the moose. So what happens is the rabbit and the raccoon, they find themselves in the same problem. And instead of fighting and pushing and shoving, they decide, let's work together. Let's come up with a solution together for this problem. And when they do this, they both end up getting what they wanted. They both end up happy in the end. All right, guys. So now that we've seen the first short film, I want to ask you what you already know. So think of your favorite movie or your favorite book, and what do you think was the moral of that movie or book? What was the lesson that it was trying to teach you? This would be the moral of the story. All right, guys, that's some great examples. Good job. Now we're going to watch short film number two. We're going to do this one together. I'm not going to tell you before we watch it what the moral of the story is. This time, I want you to pay really close attention to the context clues, maybe even some cause and effect that will help you to identify the moral of the story. And just remember, keep in mind, the moral of the story is the lesson that is being taught. And then we're going to talk about it afterwards, what we think the moral of the story is and why you think that is. So make sure you pay really close attention to the details. All right, guys, great job identifying the moral of the story. So from what we've discussed, it seems like we have come to the understanding that the moral of this story is you never know what someone's dealing with. Always be kind. And a lot of times that kindness will come back to you later on. So what we saw in this short film was the dog is out fishing with his owner, with his human. And the human is using worms to catch fish. And this bird comes along, he wants to steal the worms. And the dog's like, no, my owner needs these worms to catch the fish. And so they start fighting over these worms, fighting over these worms. And eventually the bird gives up, returns to its nest, and doesn't have any worms to feed its babies. The bird tries to feed fish to its babies. They don't want it. They want worms. The dog sees this and starts to feel bad, starts to think, oh my gosh, I should have shared these worms, so that the bird could feed its babies. So the dog ends up calling the bird back over, sharing the worms, and that makes the dog feel very happy. You can see the dog immediately seems to feel happy or proud of himself for showing that kindness to the bird. The cool part is the bird comes back and brings a bunch of fish to the dog, and that's where the kindness comes back. So the dog shows the bird this kindness, and the bird returns the favor by then giving the dog all the fish, which is what was the dog and the owner's ultimate goal, was to catch fish. So everybody got what they wanted in the end. Kindness always wins. It pays off to be kind. It worked out for everybody. Okay, so now we're going to read I Am a Tiger. I want you guys to pay close attention to the characters in this book, what they look like, what they're saying, and try and find the moral of the story, okay? All right, so now that we've read I Am a Tiger, I want you guys to go ahead and get into your small groups. You're in your small groups, you're going to discuss what you think the moral of the story is. Then, as a group, you're going to create a story of your own. using the same moral that is in I Am a Tiger. So you're not going to create a new moral. You're not going to create a new lesson to be learned. You're going to take what you learned from I Am a Tiger, the moral of the story, and you're going to create a new story to show that same moral. You can do this a couple ways. You can decide as a group to draw your stories like a little comic strip. You can draw it out, or you guys can act it out like a play. Just make sure that everyone's equally involved, everyone participates, everyone gets to contribute their ideas. All right, guys, you did a great job collaborating and practicing together. Those presentations were amazing. So now you guys are going to do some independent practice. You are going to go to to the classroom library and pick out a book of your choice. You're going to read this book for your independent reading time. And when independent reading time is over, we're going to go around the room and share which book we chose, what the moral of the story is, and what led us to that conclusion. Why do you think that's the moral of the story? One thing, make sure you do not choose a book that's too long, because, you know, if you don't get to finish it before our independent reading time is up, you may not grasp the entire moral of the story. Also, it may be a helpful tip to choose a story that has a lot of pictures that will give you a little bit more clues as to the moral of the story. All right, guys, you absolutely nailed it. It seems like you have a great understanding of the moral of the story. So let's just take a minute and reflect. The moral of the story is the lesson that the story is meant to teach. Now, moral of the story does not always have to just be in books, as we saw. It can also be in short films and movies and plays. And honestly, there can even be a moral of the story in your daily life. If you go through something and it teaches you a lesson, that is the moral of what happened. So it's very important to be able to recognize the moral of a story because it's there to teach you something. And we're always learning. It's always great to learn new things. All right, so for my reflection, the first question is, what did you learn about teaching through the micro-teach experience? Well, the first thing I learned is how super helpful the gradual release method is. I think it gives so many teaching opportunities to lead by example, but then also allow them to collaborate, but then also allow them to do it independently. It just gives a lot of chances for students that maybe learn in different ways to learn in their own way, but still within the same lesson. I also learned that having a PowerPoint to guide my lesson is super helpful. I think one, it's very visually appealing for the students and really gives them something to pay attention to and look at. It also serves as a good reminder if they need to look back at it while they're doing their work. And I think too, for me as an educator, it also helps keep me on track and helps, guide my lesson. So I'm not just standing up there lecturing and, getting off track or anything like that. It really keeps me focused and on track. What will you take away and use as a future teacher? So definitely in the future, I plan to use the gradual release method because like I said, I feel like it gives just so many different opportunities for students that may learn in different ways to still grasp the concept without having a whole separate lesson. I did not ever realize how much goes into lesson planning. So I think this really helped me break down the process of lesson planning so that in the future I can be very thorough and make sure that I'm covering all bases so that my students really are able to, see me model something and then work together to model, to do it and then do it on their own. It really helped me kind of figure out how I want my lessons to look in the future.